Thank you guys for joining me here for the last segment of today's show. We got the second game of Monday Night Football that we have to preview tonight on today's show is the game between the Falcons and the Las Vegas Raiders. Kickoff is set to be at 8:30 p.m. This one on the national ESPN, your local ESPN national channel, while the other one is going to be on ABC and ESPN Plus. But it's a weird game because both teams are having different goals in mind. And what I mean by that is, first off, Atlanta, just lost the lead in the NFC South to the Buccaneers, and they're on a 4-game losing streak right now, and they find themselves in a 6-7 record right now, in ninth place in the NFC overall, behind the Rams, or actually now behind the Seahawks, and the Washington Commanders at that 7th spot. So it's looking pretty rough. It has looked pretty rough, especially with the game against the Broncos, and then you add in there the Seahawks. The Chargers game was brutal, and now the Vikings game definitely was not doing them any favors. But they got a good opportunity here with the Raiders, traveling to Las Vegas and whatnot. It's a good opportunity for them to get back into shape a little bit, because the way the Buccaneers are playing, as a side note, it's looking very impressive, and now you kind of got to favor them in that division, certainly, because the way that they beat up on the Chargers was not something I was expecting. So it just adds even more to the fact that the Falcons have to win this game. But as bad as things have been for them, and the fact that they need this win, it's definitely not been as bad as it has been for the Raiders, right? Because the Raiders, they're one of those. They're 2-11. Like it's hard to find things to talk about with them, other than the fact that maybe they're struggling, right? Or not, maybe they are and have been struggling, but you can't just always talk about that. That's one thing you could always talk about, but you can't just always bring it up. So they're talked about less and less as the season goes on. And it's unfortunate, because I kind of had some hopes for them, adding Christian Wilkins to this team, and obviously Max Crosby, and knowing what Brock Bowers is now, you'd have hoped to have seen a little bit more production from them. But it's been one of those years, right? They're 2-11 now, and they can't even get up to the amount of wins that they had last year, right? They had 8 wins last year, and now they're going to get nowhere near that, obviously, and they're on a 9-game losing streak, and the only teams, funny enough, that they have beaten have been the Ravens of all teams and the Browns, who, the Browns aren't very good, but the Ravens still, the fact that the Raiders have beaten them is insane. The last time the Raiders won was back in September 29th, against the Browns, and that was it. They haven't won in almost 2 months. Which is insane again. But in this matchup, there are some things to know in case, you want to kind of get swayed in one way or the other, depending on, I don't know, if you were really having a tough decision on who you thought was going to win this game. In this matchup, the Falcons have won the last 5 meetings between the two, and also, Aiden O'Connell is questionable in this game. I'm actually going to check now what the inactives are, because that was before, going into this game. I know he was going to try out that knee that he was nursing a little bit during the warm-ups, but now I'm looking at it, and he is inactive. Aiden O'Connell is not going to play tonight for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's inactive, and it'll be Desmond Ridder or Carter Bradley. I'm imagining it's going to be Desmond Ridder, because I don't really know who Carter Bradley is, so it has to be Desmond Ridder. There's no way Carter Bradley is going to start, so it's going to be Desmond Ridder. And why that's important is because Desmond Ridder was let go of by the Atlanta Falcons this season. With the addition of Kirk Cousins, they let Desmond Ridder walk after a very bad year last year, and now, funny enough, as things play out, he is now facing his former team tonight in a matchup that you probably never would have dreamed that would be the matchup between quarterbacks, right? Ridder and Kirk Cousins facing off on Monday Night Football. But that's how funny the NFL really works. And now it just adds a little bit more of a different flavor to this game, I guess, with that little narrative there. But I mean, it doesn't really change too much, I would think, right, with the Raiders and Falcons. But more positively for the Raiders, Brock Bowers set the NFL rookie tight end record with 87 receptions last week. He broke Sam Laporta's record from last year for the most receptions by a rookie tight end with 86. He is now at 87, still closing in on extending that lead and that record even more with 3 games left on the schedule. And also, it doesn't end there with Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers is 67 yards away from becoming only the 3rd rookie tight end with 1,000 yards in his first year since Kyle Pitts, but also only joining Kyle Pitts and Mike Ditka back in 1961, I want to say, was when Ditka did it, and Kyle Pitts obviously did it in his rookie year. So Brock Bowers could be added to some very elite company there in terms of rookie years for these tight ends. But we mentioned the injuries. We mentioned the injury to Aiden O'Connell, but that's not where it ends there, because unfortunately for the Raiders, their best player on their team, Max Crosby, is going to need ankle surgery, so he is out for the remainder of the year. He announced earlier, last week actually, he announced it, so he's obviously not going to play. Their defensive tackle, Adam Butler, I don't see on the injury reserve, or I don't see on the inactives list, so I'm assuming he's good to go. He was battling a concussion, but he has no injury designation, so he's good to go for tonight's game. Alexander Madison is going to be back tonight after missing the last 3 games, and also their defensive back, Nate Hobbs, is also expected to play tonight after being out a little bit with a injury of himself. And for the Falcons, it's only really the only real noticeable, big injury is their linebacker Troy Anderson. Troy Anderson is going to be out with a knee injury, so he's obviously a big part of their defense, overall. So he's not going to be playing tonight for the Falcons. And like last segment, I talked about what I wanted to see, kind of like a goal for each team. Starting off with the Falcons, what I want to see from them is the fact that, Kirk Cousins, right? It starts and ends with Kirk Cousins. I have to see, and I want to see Kirk just get back to playing mistake-free football, right? The turnovers are one thing, or I should say the poor play is one thing, but the turnovers and things like that, and the hesitation, the double clutching and things like that, all of that is not who Kirk is. It can be who Kirk is, because then the Falcons wouldn't have brought him in if they saw that kind of performance, right? And I know he was a little banged up with the severe injury, right, obviously, but the opportunity to see Kirk play a 2-11 team and kind of regain some of that confidence, albeit on the road, is going to be huge for this team, and just getting back on the right track. I don't need to see him throwing for like 304 touchdowns, but just the no turnovers, no hurrying your team, cut down the penalties as well, and get this offense back looking to what it used to look like, in the beginning portion of the season, where they beat the Eagles, where they played a close game with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they got some pretty impressive wins, both times against the Buccaneers, right, and things like that. We need to see that team, play to that level, and they're capable of doing it with Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts. He's too talented not to be used, and obviously Bijan Robinson as well. So I'm hoping to just see them get back on track and slowly build up to it as the season ends. And really for the Raiders, I just want to see more of Brock Bowers. Continue to make history, versus a weaker part of the Falcons team, right? The Falcons, their strongest part is their offense, so their defense has been struggling a little bit, and I want to see Brock Bowers just continue to make history, essentially, right? Just continue to show out in the remainder of these games. Regardless if they win or not, I just want to see Brock Bowers play well, and that's pretty much it for them. But now looking at the matchups, right? The matchups I want to see starts and ends with Brock Bowers, right? I want to see him going up against Jesse Bates, maybe Justin Simmons, maybe some of their linebackers, right? Who takes the responsibility of going up against, Brock Bowers and trying to slow him down and, covering him essentially, right? Everybody knows he's the part of their offense that, is the best part of their offense, right? So, who takes on that responsibility? And I'm interested to see how the Falcons game plan around trying to stop him, right? So that'll be pretty interesting to look at. And another matchup kind of goes for both teams, the amount of pass rushing pressure they allow against both offensive lines. Basically, both offensive lines going up against the other team's pass rush, because both teams rank near the bottom in terms of sacks, recorded. So there's not a lot of pressure coming anyway, but who gives up more? And the team that usually gives up more sacks in a battle of teams that don't really give up that many, or don't really get that many, I should say, usually end up winning if they record more. So which offensive line will hold up better, and which one will get in trouble a little bit more by allowing that pressure coming in. So that'll be a big one. And the last one I just put up here is Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier going up against a defensive line without Max Crosby, without Christian Wilkins, obviously. I'm interested to see how they do, and if the running game is going to completely dominate this game potentially, if both of those guys are able to get going. But overall, my prediction, it was obviously going to be Atlanta. They have something to play for. They can't miss the playoffs. I think that would really be a devastating end to a season for them, for Raheem Morris, and what they're trying to build there. So they have to win this game. They should win this game. And Las Vegas, again, isn't playing for much other than one of the top two selections in the draft. So I'm going to go with the Falcons to win, maybe by 10 points. I'll say they'll win by 10 points comfortably here over the Raiders. So that'll be both games. Hopefully we get a couple good matchups on tonight's, rendition of Monday Night Football, and it should be good with both of these teams, or at least one of these two teams in each game, playing for something meaningful here towards the end of the year. But that does conclude it for today's episode. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's show, and please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of the show, please check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel on YouTube, for more NFL content surrounding the Chip Shot Football Podcast. And again, a final reminder, because of Christmas and the scheduling with Christmas and the holidays, we are going to be live most likely on Monday and Friday this week, and then there's going to be no shows during the Christmas week, and then we'll be back the following week with shows on Monday and Friday as well, before we get going again on a regular schedule once the new year hits. So that's all from today's episode. I'll see you guys towards the end of the week, probably on Friday, potentially Thursday, for another episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to